You've heard basically wall-to-wall coverage of Bridgegate. It's on CNN, it's on MSNBC, all over the internet. One place you probably haven't heard anything about it, though, is Fox News. Yesterday, on Wednesday, the day that the scandal broke, Fox effectively didn't talk about it at all. In fact, on Bill O'Reilly's show and on Sean Hannity's show, it was not mentioned once, despite the fact that everyone else across the media was talking about it. And that seems like an odd omission. Now, it was talked about at least a little bit. Megyn Kelly did address it. Bret Baier talked about it briefly. But when we talk about the actual numbers of what different networks thought about the significance of this scandal, Fox News covered it for just 15 minutes compared to CNN's 150 minutes. Now, look, I'm going to be honest, I have almost as big of a problem with that number for CNN as I do for Fox. I certainly think that it warranted more than 15 minutes of coverage on Fox, especially because this was the day that the big part of it broke. But 150 minutes seems like an unnecessary amount of scrutiny when Chris Christie hadn't even come out and talked about it yet. And you can expect that that number will be even higher today. Now, it did come up a little bit more today on Thursday, Fox deciding that, look, we actually do have to cover it, although the way that they addressed it, especially in Fox's morning shows, was a little bit interesting. Steve Doocy, Hasselbeck were talking about the Gates book on Obama and the military, and they're not happy at all with all this bridge talk. Watch.
Imagine the commander-in-chief claiming that he supports you but not your mission. How do you separate the two? And how do you separate yourself as commander-in-chief from your troops and the mission that you're putting forward? It just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense on paper. Doesn't make sense on air. Doesn't make sense from the President of the United States. To hear any of that coming forward in this book is just shocking.
Yeah, and I was watching one news channel yesterday. You would think that this would be a big story. All about the bridge thing with Christie. We're going to be talking about that in a little while.
Yeah, there's Steve Doocy keeping up on all the relevant news, talking about the bridge thing. I don't even think it's news. We're going to talk about it in the next segment, by the way. So I love that. So they are talking there about Bob Gates' book that says that or their interpretation of it is that Barack Obama doesn't care for the military, doesn't support their mission. Gates did not agree with Barack Obama on a lot of his military decisions. Now, I have to admit, I have not actually read the book, which means that I have something in common with every conservative commenter on the internet and on Fox News. None of them have actually read the book. And people who have actually read the book say that the conservatives are completely misinterpreting what Gates said. Now, certainly Gates is not going to be a huge fan of Obama, but they're selectively taking a couple of quotes out of context to reinforce a narrative that they've been pushing for years, that Barack Obama doesn't care for the military at all. And by the way, so Hasselbeck there, it doesn't make any sense to me that he would say this. Not on any level does it make sense. Then perhaps you don't actually know what you're talking about. If it doesn't even convince you and you're readily predisposed to believe this sort of BS. And so they want to get past the Chris Christie stuff. Now, that doesn't mean that they're big fans of Chris Christie. It's just their general, standing motivation, their standard operating procedure is, why should we be attacking a Republican when there's a perfectly good Democratic president to attack? And so they're going to focus on the Gates thing. Now, I can't say at this point what sort of legs the Bridgegate conspiracy will have. Perhaps if Melissa Harris Perry had talked about Kieran Romney a couple days later, we'd still be discussing that. But people got sick of talking about the Romney child, and so now we've moved on to Bridgegate. Hopefully it'll last for at least a few days, just because I want to know if there's any way that they can tie Chris Christie to this. Because, look, he seems like the sort of guy who probably would be vain and petty enough to use his political power to damage Democrats that he wasn't in favor of. And just as a way of illustrating how petty it actually was, they used this political power to hurt the Fort Lee mayor. Chris Christie was not in any danger of losing. That mayor's supporting or not supporting Chris Christie in his re-election bid was almost 100% meaningless. It had no influence whatsoever on the actual outcome of the vote, in which Chris Christie won by like 30 points. And so I would think that you'd just celebrate. You'd be happy that your guy, Chris Christie, had won re-election, but instead they immediately begin plotting how they can take down those damn Democrats that didn't support them. So that seems petty, it seems childish, and for those two reasons, I think that people might actually care about it, whether Fox News wants to cover it or not.